Guys, back. We're on to part 2 of our book 1996 by Gloria Naylor. We left off on page 21. At first, I didn't notice anything unusual. January was a peaceful month for me. I spent it sorting my research books into different piles in the order I needed to read them. I began working on the plans for my garden layout in my gardening journal. Those were uneventful days that brought me comfort with their regularity. Up at 8 with a cup of coffee in hers mug while looking out my sun porch window at the old beauty in the water. Both sides of my house gave me a special view. If I sat up on the second floor in a little room off the bedroom, there were 2 ancient cedars which framed the outline of my garden below, and McTeer Drive, the road that ran north and south past the back of the house. I had finally decided to put up some real furniture in my house. So during the afternoons, I got into my red pickup truck and drove to some of the county's many businesses that sold old furniture. It took several trips because these shops held everything from junk to beautiful estate pieces. My taste and my pocketbook ran more to the middle range, good solid used furniture that I carted back in my truck. I thought it appropriate. Old houses should have old furniture pieces with a spirit and a history. In early evenings, I visited my greenhouse to check on the seedlings of tomatoes, peppers, and marigolds that I had started. Then an earlier dinner, some music, and to bed at about 10 o'clock or so. And so my days went. Nothing special or earth-shattering, but they brought me contentment. One day I returned from Walmart and noticed that my front door was unlocked. I had left a carpenter in the house replacing the doors to my kitchen cabinets while I made the quick run to town. Perhaps he had forgotten to turn the latch and slam the door to lock it. Coming from New York, I had never felt insecure on St. Helena, but there was some concern because of the news of increasing break-ins on the island. Also, on one of my long absences, someone had come in through a window and stolen my TV. I entered the house with my antennas up. Nothing was missing, but I noticed that someone had been tampering with a box of garden seeds I left on the sun porch. The edges were curled up as if someone had tried to pry it open. A quick tour of the house led me to discover a small red and white flashlight left on the mantel of the fireplace in the living room. My concern deepened. Why on earth would anyone look up my fireplace? The third and final signal of an intruder was found on the second floor. There was insulation lying on the floor under the trapdoor to the attic. I had not been up in that attic for weeks, but someone else had. The question would plague me several times in coming months. Why? You come into a house, check seed packages, look up a fireplace, and open the attic door. What could you possibly be looking for? Nothing was taken. Nothing except those 3 signs was out of place. Brief call to the carpenter confirmed that he had never left the kitchen area. He put on the new cabinet facings and gone home. So I guess that left the boogeyman. As I sat listening to my music that evening, I began to wonder if I should be so cavalier about my safety. St. Helena wasn't New York, but crazies were everywhere, and I was out in the sticks with little security. Maybe I'd need better locks, a new alarm system. I hated having to think that way, but St. Helena was changing, and in some ways, not for the better. After my usual glass of wine, I banked the fire in the fireplace and went to bed. The next morning, I was out in my garden roping off the area for my new asparagus bed when I saw the footprints. Dog prints were in my garden, and at the edge of my asparagus bed was a human footprint. I knew it couldn't be mine because it had taken me 4 hours to prepare that bed. When you're planting asparagus, you have to dig deep at least a foot and a half down and mound the dirt to take the roots. I wouldn't have walked anywhere near that bed after I'd prepared it. So could you have been walking in my garden with a dog or dogs? And again, why? Paranoia is a slow poison and a lethal one. It usually starts with small things and then grows to color almost everything in your life. A harmless incident takes on gigantic proportions until they are everywhere and it is waiting to get you around every corner. As a native New Yorker, I had my healthy share of paranoia, and I'd like to think it kept me out of dangerous situations. When that little red light goes off in your brain, you glance over your shoulder at the sound of swiftly approaching feet. You take a cab instead of the subway after a night out with friends. Sometimes suspicions pan out, and other times you'll never know if they did. The running footsteps turn out to be a jogger or someone trying to catch a bus. But was there someone or something waiting on that subway that you'd avoided? True paranoid is convinced that there was. A healthy person forgets the whole thing as he settles down into his cab ride. I didn't want paranoia to spill my hard-earned year on the island. Maybe I was reading too much into what a third party could easily explain away. I turned to my neighbor, Betty. Betty was a true character. Born in Texas, she had come to St. Helena 40 years before to raise her children. I thought I'd stay for 10 years, she said. It was a good place for kids, but now they're all gone and I'm still stuck here. And there are too many burrs in this grass for me to go around barefoot like I did in Texas. She could always make me laugh, calling herself a barefoot hillbilly from a town with no hills. One thing was for sure, she knew everyone and just about everything that went on in our part of the island. I laid out my story to her, and her clear brown eyes were troubled. There's been talk, she said. The deputy was calling around not too long ago asking questions about you. What kind of questions? Just who you were, how long you've been here, that kind of thing. She was having trouble meeting my eyes. The evasiveness disturbed me. Betty was one of the most straightforward people I knew. If I were you, she said, I'd just leave it alone. Things will die down soon. But I didn't want to leave it alone. If people were talking about me, I wanted to know what they were saying. However, I realized she had given me about as much as I was going to get on this visit. She walked me back out to the porch. We stood there for a moment, taking in the beauty of St. Helena Sound as the bright winter sun sparkled on its surface. Sometimes I just hate small towns, she said. People can be very cruel. They don't have much to talk about, so they just fill their mouths with nonsense. You're welcome here anytime, Gloria. I've always told you that. A minute before, and I mean it now. You know, Betty, I said, someone has come into my home without permission. They've brought dogs into my garden, and I think I should know the reason why. I think you should too, she said. But I'm wrong. I'm the wrong person to ask. Maybe you should have a talk with Eunice. And she turned and went back into the house. Eunice again. Every snag in my plans to spend a peaceful year in St. Helena was somehow tied to that woman. I'd relented and took up the rat poison from beneath the house after a couple weeks because I didn't really want to hurt her cats. I just wanted them out of my life, like I wanted her now out of my life. Here she is appearing again like a bad penny. I made a large fire in the fireplace later that evening and sat staring at it. It cleared my mind to watch the yellow flames burn blue and then silver as the fragrant cedar logs crackled and hummed while burning down. The word came to me out of nowhere. Drugs. They had been in my house searching for drugs because some lie Eunice must have told. I was furious and started to march over to her house that very minute to confront her. But what good would it do? She was a nut, that's all, a nutcase. I would only be aggravating myself for nothing. I felt a flush of shame that my neighbors would believe that someone like me would be dealing drugs. I had worked hard for this little bit of peace that I was trying to wrench out of life. I had got myself another glass of wine. This was a day that definitely called for 3 glasses of wine. I got nice and mellow and went to bed. That would have been the end of it if I hadn't spotted her in the Winn-Dixie supermarket that Saturday. She was easy to spot, as tall as she was. She was shopping with another woman who was short and had masses of red hair. We were in the produce section. She had her cart filled with about 50 cans of cat food and 2 20-pound bags of kitty litter. Lying on top of all that was a single bunch of celery. I ought to take that celery and slap her with it, I thought. She was turning her cart around to head for the checkout line when I intercepted it with mine. "Hello, Eunice," I said. "Looks like we're both doing a little bit of shopping." She didn't say anything and tried to maneuver past me. "By the way," I continued, "I'm having a party at my house and wondered if you could come." "No," she glared at me. "I won't be able to make it." "But I didn't tell you when it was. It doesn't matter. I can't come." "But surely it would be right up your alley. It's a drug party. Heroin, coke, uppers. You know, all those things the police were looking for in my house. They were in my house, Eunice. Did you know that?" She turned about 3 different shades of red. "Stop harassing me," she said, with her lips pressed close together. "Harassing you? You call the police with lies about me, and I'm harassing you?" "Look," she said, "your problems are your problems, and if the police were in your house, you brought it on yourself. Now get out of my way." She jerked her cart around mine and headed off at full speed, her confused friend in tow. She suddenly stopped and spun around to face me and shouted, "Murderer!" And then she was off again. She shoved it. "Just shove it, you bitch," I said, throwing a head of cabbage into my cart. My heart was pounding and my hands trembled a bit. For the first time in my life, I had made a scene. I should have known better. The one thing I like about the South was its civility, and I had hardly been civil. But then again, neither had she. Dick Simon is up earlier for his morning run. It's a glorious Saturday with the air crisp and cold, just like the way he likes it. He'll do an hour. It is always exactly an hour in Rock Creek Park. Before returning home to shower and make the lunch shift at homeless shelter in Adams Morgan. He's been volunteering at the shelter since coming to Washington 10 years ago. Before that, it was a shelter in Roxbury when he lived in Boston and was earning his doctorate at MIT. He goes to shelters to remind himself what can happen if he's not careful. With the slightest misstep, there you go, back into the gutter. Not that he had started at the bottom. His parents had been concert musicians, but the bottom was always waiting. One slip and you slide right past where you started into the bottom. The bottom. It was even in his nightmares. One typo on an office memorandum, and there he was, sliding. He's heading for the door when the phone rings. Something tells him not to answer. Let the machine pick up. Something tells him it's Eunice, and she'll call back. Would keep calling every hour until she reached him. He could have had his run in peace if he ignores that phone. It could begin his day off from work in the way he's looked forward to all week, in the way he's earned. He's slipping his keys into his pocket of his Armani sweatsuit when the machine clicks on. "I know you're there. Pick up the phone. This is important." It's always important, Eunice, he thinks. I've never gotten a call from you, a message, a card when it wasn't important, urgent, needy. He feels a flush of shame at the way he's thinking. She is, after all, his sister, his baby sister. They are both unmarried and childless, and all they've had is each other since their parents' tragic car accident. He's tried to be there for his sister, to reassure her, to tell her that she still has someone to lean on. Someone is still left in the world to love her. But Eunice has a void in her life that no one's love can fill. She's worse than the bottom. She's a bottomless pit that sucks in all you have to give and berates you for not giving any more. And somehow Dick can never shake the feeling that it's his fault. He was only 16 when their parents died and had tried to fill their shoes, but he had been a miserable failure at it. Eunice, in his one mistake that he keeps hidden from the world, he moves in. Because of that, he fears her. Somehow, some way, she could drag him down to the bottom, where he won't be of any use to her or anyone else. I said, "Pick up the phone, Dick. Pick up the..." "Good morning, Eunice. I was just on my way out the door." "You can run anytime. This is important." "What is it?" "She called me a Jew bitch in the supermarket today." "Who called you a Jew bitch?" "The woman who killed my cat. She shouted it out in the supermarket. Everybody heard her. Hillary was with me if you don't believe it. I have Hillary right here. She can tell you." Simon heaves a deep sigh. "Hillary, her partner in crime." "Hi, Dick. How you doing?" "What happened, Hillary?" "Well, there was this argument or something about drugs." "Drugs?" "Yeah, and then I didn't hear it all. But she did say bitch. That I heard. But Eunice, I didn't exactly hear her say Jew bitch. I heard..." Eunice is back on the line. "It was Jew bitch. That's what it was. I told you she hated me, and that's why she killed Orwell. I told you. Maybe now you'll believe me." Eunice starts crying. "It was awful in front of all those people. And so it goes," he thinks. "And so it goes." "Eunice, listen to me. You're 36 years old and you know that the world is full of bigots, and it seems like this woman is one. Just say to hell with it and go on with your day. Go on with your life, for God's sake." Now the day is ruined and he takes his run. Her voice is reverberating in his head. He is neither proud nor ashamed to be a Jew. It is what he was, and he accepts it with the same matter of factness that he accepts his hair color or his eyes. His parents hadn't been religious people, and neither was he. But Eunice had decided to become Orthodox in her late 20s, wrapping herself in a cloak of righteousness he was sure would pass like other fads she'd picked up and discarded through most of her life. At one time, she was even practicing Buddhism. Simon had practiced nothing but self-preservation, set a goal, aim for it, and by God, hit it. Let nothing stand in your way, at least all of your ethnicity. That's how he's risen so far and so fast in the agency. His feet pound on the graveled path as he flies past the clumps of ash and pine trees. The cold air stings his face as he forces himself to speed up just a little bit more. That's it, just a little bit more. He'd first come to Fort Meade on twice yearly seminars, a part of temporary think tank. They drew the country's best minds to discuss applications of the latest scientific theories on cryptology and code breaking. He'd felt exhilarated to be away from the stuffy climate of MIT, to be at a place where his doctorate in mathematics could be used to tie into the real world. Because he'd taken a little extra time with his papers, given just a little bit more, he'd stood out. Those papers got him a position as head of research and development. It took only 5 years to become assistant to the deputy director, and he gave himself another 5 before reaching deputy director, the highest post that a civilian can hold at the National Security Agency. None of this would have happened if he'd run around screaming, victim, like his sister did all the time. He finishes his run and decides to forego the shelter this one time. He'll go to the office and do some work. There were always letters to answer, memos to be composed. Work is his salvation. No, it's more than that. Work is what he is at the core. Working takes his mind off failure. Yes, pulling his Lexus into an assigned parking space, donning his green badge, and walking through those triple set of gates can take his mind off of anything that even comes to close to failure. It was February. In the Sea Islands, that means that you can already smell the beginning of spring. My greenhouse tables were full of young seedlings. and I would start my day by checking on their growth. I marveled at how quickly the marigolds were taking root. The frail tomato seedlings were just beginning to show their sawtooth leaves, so different from the pepper plants whose spear-shaped leaves were finally gaining some size. I had agreed to speak at the Marine base on Paris Island, a short trip from St. Helena Island for Black History Month, and as with all engagements, a part of me regretting having to go as time approached. I had been told I was a forceful speaker, but shades of my childhood shyness would usually rear its head and give me butterflies as the event neared. But the young female Marine who had contacted me was deferential and extremely polite. I reasoned that it would be my way of giving back to a part of the community that contained avid fans. The theme of the luncheon was Black women and their contributions. There were about 100 people in attendance, mainly members of St. Helena's Black middle class and a good share of young Black male and female Marines. When it was my turn to take the dais, I spoke about the strength of Black women, but reminded the audience that we could never look at the Black woman without giving credit to the contributions of Black men. The Million Man March had just taken place that previous October, and it was an event that moved me deeply. The sight of hundreds of thousands of Black men brought back memories of my father, who had died in 1993. I thought about him coming home, red-eyed and tired from his shift as a subway motorman, flecks of steel dust embedded in his beard and skin, but he still kept persevering because of his belief that a responsible man took care of his family. A true man never quits. There in the Capitol were all those Black men making the same statement. I told them. It brought tears to my eyes. The next day, Betty came over to the house, carrying a copy of the Beaufort Gazette. Look, you made the papers. I had made it in a big way. On the front page was a long account about me and my speech. Revered author speaks at Paris Island. It was an accurate account of the event, which is unusual for the newspaper, and the picture wasn't bad either. I'd received lots of publicity over the course of my career, and I was always of two minds about it. On one hand, it's flattering to have people pay attention to you. On the other, you can't let yourself get a swollen head and live only with the image of yourself in other people's minds. I was quite pleased with the piece, but reminded myself that it's easy to be a big fish in a small pond, and the article was placed below the fold. So we're living the celebrity, huh? Betty said. Hardly a celebrity, I answered, but I thought, maybe now some of my neighbors will have second thoughts about the gossip going around that I'm dealing drugs. Yeah, I thought, let them see this. Betty gave me the article as a souvenir. I filed it away with my other papers, forgot about it, and went back to my plants. When Dick Simon arrives at work, there is already a pile of mail stacked on his desk. His secretary always sorts it from the least important to the most important, with the least important on the bottom. At the end of the pile is a newspaper clipping from the Beaufort Gazette with a note attached from Eunice. A double underlined, FYI, is scrawled across the yellow post-it. Also, she has highlighted the name Gloria Naylor on the second page of the clipping. She had highlighted the sentence. She cried when seeing the Million Man March. Simon flips back to the picture of the round-faced, dark-skinned woman smiling into the camera. Eunice had never told him she was Black. The thought had never crossed his mind. He had just assumed. Simon frowns deeply. Could there be something to what Eunice has been saying all along? He turns to his computer with a graphic of closed vault on the screen. He types in his password and the vault door opens. This lets him into the entire network of the NSA, but he's looking for something deeper. He consults a sheet that has passwords sectioned according to the time of day in 10-minute intervals. The sheet is shredded each day and a new one composed. It is not enough to know a password for this inner vault. You have to know what time of day to use it. The second vault door swings open when he types in the correct password. And now he's into the heart of the NSA, almost. There is a third door, but he need not concern himself with that now. He types in the name, Gloria Naylor, and a list of roughly 50 names is scrolled in front of him. Only one is in blue on the watch list. He clicks on that name, and there she is, a photo, a social security number, and a synopsis. Every Black, Latino, and Asian writer who has had any press coverage is on the NSA's watch list. This list was allegedly disbanded back in the 70s. So now it is a list that doesn't exist inside the NSA. The synopsis details in brief the subject of the books they have written. Anything political is highlighted in red. There are no red sections for a Naylor woman. It seems that she writes about Black people, Black women in particular, with little political agenda, no connection to the Nation of Islam, no connection to anyone. But yet she hates Jews. He looks at the newspaper clipping again. She's a sympathizer of Louis Farrakhan, that's certain. She is getting press for it in that hayseed of a town. What did Eunice expect? It was South Carolina, for God's sake. Maybe this bore a little more investigation. He turns to his computer again, and under her profile, he enters activate in the status line and under duration to be determined. By the end of the day, at least half a dozen people will be put to work. All of her books are assigned to readers for a detailed synopsis of each one. Every newspaper article, every book review is to be read and analyzed in the field. A low-level code 2 surveillance is to be set up. She is to be followed wherever she goes in Beaufort, with a report to be filed about her destination and whatever groups she speaks to. Files from the FBI and CIA are ordered. And just to be thorough, a background check going to her college days. Yes, by the end of the day, Gloria Naylor's life will become, no pun intended, an open book. That should just about do it, Simon thinks as he closes the second vault door. All that's left is to call Eunice. He would hate to tell her that she might have been right all along. No, he would wait on that. Let the reports come in, and he would offer her that bit of intelligence as a gift. It wasn't until February that I noticed I was being followed. I was on Ribald Road near the government complex on my way to have a nicked front windshield checked at the dealership. While stopping for a red light on the intersection of Highway 21, a man with brunette hair and a woman with shoulder-length, fluffy brown hair looked away, attempting to hide their faces. The instant I peered into my rearview mirror. This alerted me that something was amiss. Then several artificial moves were performed by the couple. The woman applied lipstick, kissed the man, applied lipstick again. They did not have the body language of people so taken with each other that they kissed publicly. I faked a left turn into the government complex on Highway 21, and they sped off. My intuition was confirmed half an hour later when I left the dealership. There was the same gold Honda pulling out from a side road and staying 3 car lengths away from me. When I turned, they turned. When I sped up, they sped up. I thought the tale originated with the sheriff's office and that it was about the drug business again. The Honda left me when I turned into Coffin Point Road and headed for my home. I decided to take the bull by the horns and go visit the sheriff's office the next day. They had no right to be telling me without cause, and if they felt there was a cause, I should be able to face my accuser. The sheriff was not in, but I talked for some length with Deputy Sheriff Miller. He stated empathetically that the sheriff's office was not behind these incidences. They wouldn't bring drug-sniffing dogs into my garden, he said. They would never come into my home without a warrant. He also said he knew Eunice Simon and didn't think that she could have investigated these incidences. I did not believe Deputy Sheriff Miller. Why? Because it was clear that he was a decent man. There was occasionally deep concern in his eyes as I spoke about my ordeal. Then he would become a bit gruff and defensive, and he couldn't meet my eyes at all when he stated that Eunice couldn't be behind this. He has all the signs of a decent man. Not once did I see amusement or confusion in his eyes. Those are signs to look for when a seasoned cop encounters a wild story from a slightly deranged woman who pops up at his office. I went home dejected. If the police weren't going to help, who could I turn to? I was basically alone in St. Helena. I had few social contracts there, but no one I knew could go to with this. My friends and support system were in New York for the most part, and I certainly wasn't going back home after only 2 months. No, I would weather this the best way I knew how. Perhaps Betty's advice was just let things calm down. I tried to follow that advice, but then the parade of cars began to drive past my house. Barry Levine doesn't like the report he'll send to Dick Simon. The Naylor woman has spotted the tail and gone to the police. How could she have done that? Just luck, he thinks, nothing but dumb luck. He takes his fingers out of his mouth and looks at the thumb cuticle that's starting to bleed. A lousy habit, chewing his nails when he's nervous, and he has a lot to be nervous about. Dick Simon is not a man who accepts failure and anything for a reason. Levine could lose his job over this, and he likes his job. He runs the South Carolina office of the NSA out of an antique store in Columbia. Straight out of college, he's only held the position for 9 months, and it suits his temperament. He liked to quit. He liked the quiet, laid-back work environment, the short winters and long summers, and up until now, he hasn't had much to do except sort through news clippings and file reports on skinheads, the militia movement, the KKK, and other assorted nutballs sprinkled through the state. Writers are rare, and a black woman writer living in a sleepy town like Beaufort, rarer. Not rarer, unique. His only one ever. And to have reported that he messed it up was unthinkable. The only thing the woman did was make trips to Walmart and a gardening supply stores. Another unthinkable crosses his mind. What if he just left out the visit to Deputy Miller? A lousy half-hour meeting that showed she was paranoid, that no one was telling her, looking for drug connections. But you don't do things like that. You never did things like that. It could backfire. What if she kept going to the police? What if she started writing and calling congressmen and senators? She would be dismissed as a nutcase. That's true. But then Levine wouldn't have no record of where it began. Do you white out the second visit or the third? What do you do if she actually gets on the plane and goes to Washington, D.C. to meet some lame-brained congressman? How do you explain where it all began? Unlikely true. But people can't surprise you. You never give them the benefit of the doubt. Expect the worst. That's Levine's motto. The worst that could happen when Dick Simon gets his report is dismissal. No, that's not true. Reassignment. Yes, the worst would be to get sent to Minnesota or some other god-awful state where it snowed all the time and the wind froze your butt like an icicle. He decides to file his report, but the trick is to insinuate that the Home Office has tied his hands. A Code 2 surveillance only requires a team of cars on 2 12-hour shifts. Given the nature of the place and the luck of the target, a higher code would be needed. A Code 3 would let him tap her phone and beef up the surveillance to determine if she's getting intelligence from somewhere. And it's not his fault that he's restricted to a Code 2. Dick Simon is not a happy camper when he gets Barry Levine's report. It's one lousy woman living alone and that asshole who couldn't keep tabs on her. The nerve of that worm. The unmitigated nerve to suggest that it was his fault, that he hadn't placed the right code on the operation. Simon picks up his snow globe and tosses it from hand to hand. The book reports were all in and the only red flag he had seen was in a novel called Bailey's Cafe. She had written about an Ethiopian Jew, a Russian Jew, and founding of the state of Israel, a sympathetic portrait, the report had said. That remained to be seen. It also said that she criticized Israel for not admitting Ethiopian Jews when the state was first founded. What right did she have to criticize Israel at all? It definitely supported the fact that she was a sympathizer of the Nation of Islam and Louis Farrakhan. But did it justify a Code 3? Had that worm sent him anything that proved she was a subversive and anti-Semite, while it was clear that she was both? She hadn't made contact with the Black Muslims who had a chapter in Beaufort County. She hadn't been seen buying a copy of their newspaper, The Final Call. He had nothing but a botched surveillance. The snow globe moves faster and faster between Simon's two hands, faster and faster. If he authorizes a Code 3 now, it gives credence to Levine's report that somehow he, Simon, made a bad call from the beginning. But then again, it might pick up intelligence from her phone calls that she's an anti-Semite, which would justify the whole business. But you can't initiate a Code 3 without getting something from a Code 2. Something, anything. That is what he would tell Levine, bring me something, except that now she knows she's being watched. She would be more careful. Well, that wasn't Simon's problem. Let Levine do his job. Put on a surveillance with people who didn't have the thumbs up their asses. Make her think it has all gone away. She's on a Code 2 and it will stay on a Code 2 until Levine brings him something. Barry Levine knows that his operation is doomed. Once a target knows that he is being followed, it's much easier for him to pick up a tail, especially when it's a lousy Code 2. With only 2 teams working, the Naylor woman was getting help from somewhere, and his hands were tied. What if he stopped their surveillance for a couple of days, let her relax, and then put it back on? But his assignment called for a daily report, no exceptions. The answer is not to cut back, but to accelerate the coverage. How in the hell was he going to do that while still burdened with only Code 2? The cuticles around his thumbs are bleeding more from his gnawing on them. He puts his thumb in his mouth and sucks on the salty blood. Dick Simon is doing this on purpose. He knows that now because he wants to take away his job. The man never liked him, never gave him any support. The chimes on the front door of the shop ring as a delivery man brings in a shipment of boxes. It's the fiesta ware he's been waiting for. Unwrapping the dishes, he thinks back to when he was a child and his mother took out the fiesta ware for a Passover. That's when he gets the idea of the Anti-Defamation League. He has a cousin who works out of their Columbia office. Surely Yuri could be of some help. The ADL keeps files on people, lots of people. Maybe the Naylor woman is one of them. The phone rings only twice. Yuri, it's Barry. Long time no hear from. Not a red cent. You still owe me $50. This call isn't about money. It should be. Where's my loan? It's coming. Listen, this is important. I want you to check your files for Gloria Naylor. And see if she's in there. Any ties to the Nation of Islam, Louis Farrakhan. Mr. Big Time, working for the Department of Defense. Don't you have your own files? Yuri, I know this is a big favor, not as big as my $50. Yuri, my job depends on this. You're not kidding, are you? I've never been more serious in my life. Okay, hold on. Levine starts gnawing on his thumb as he waits. Yuri returns after 5 minutes or so. Clean as a whistle. Nothing? Nada. Levine sees his job swirling down a toilet bowl, round and round and round. Gone. Yuri, listen, I have reasons to believe, good reason, that this woman is a threat. Tell me more. For security reasons, I can't go into great detail, but there's evidence that she's a supporter of Louis Farrakhan in the Nation of Islam. So she's black? And a writer. This is much I can say. Because it's public knowledge, her books have elements of anti-Semitism. She's someone we need to watch. Where does she live? Beaufort, St. Helena Island. Homegrown. So we have a local bigot? No, she's from New York. She has a second home down here, and that's where she's about to stir up trouble. Do you know Rabbi Geller? He won't be any help. In a case like this, he might. I'll give him a call, see what we can do for you. Rabbi Geller is listening to Mozart when his phone rings. He often does this in the middle of the day when he needs to think deeply about some affair for the synagogue. Today, it's the budget, how to make dollars stretch to cover the expenses for the renovation of the roof and additional room for the women's auxiliary. He can't take it out of his living expenses. They were strapped as it was. A wife and 2 kids to send to college means debt, heavy debt. Maybe he could shave something off the community outreach fund. He takes off his glasses, rubs the bridge of his nose, and stretches his long legs to loosen the cramps. Only 40 years old, and his body becomes a mass of the knots. When he is disturbed, exercise would do the trick, but the only activity he enjoys is an occasional game of basketball with the youths. The St. Helena Reformed Synagogue prides itself on its relationship with other churches in the poor of the county. It holds seminars on Black and Jewish relations, social mixes with the Baptist Church, and the basketball games. The phone, just like the bills that are running through the Rabbi Geller's head, doesn't stop. He picks it up reluctantly. It's Yuri Levine, and his tale is a long one. There's a situation on St. Helena that needs to be dealt with. An outside agitator has moved down from New York with an agenda to help recruit members for the Nation of Islam. No, she can't be ignored because it's a known fact that she hates Jews, and she's determined to stir up trouble. She has even gotten the Beaufort Gazette to help her spread her propaganda. Did he remember the Million Man March? Rabbi Geller says, the Million Man March. How could he forget it? The sight of all those Black men assembled on behalf of Louis Farrakhan had sent a chill up his spine. If he could recruit 1 million, that meant 10 million stayed at home and subscribed to his philosophy. It was a coup of the decade. Rabbi Geller didn't blame the Black community for being misled. He blamed his news media for giving Farrakhan so much press. He had spread his message right on the 6 o'clock news, and with the help of idiots like Larry King, separate, agitate. That was not going to help the Black community. You form coalitions for progress. You bridge gaps by holding out your hands to the people who you want to befriend you. That's what Rabbi Geller has been trying to do in St. Helena for at least 10 years, bridge gaps. He knew about the local chapter of the Nation of Islam. They were small and ineffectual, and they had worked hard to make sure they stayed that way. His synagogue wanted to help Black people, but Louis Farrakhan was telling them to help themselves by leaving well-meaning whites like him out in the cold. He doesn't let Yuri know, but he has seen the article about this woman. Several members of his congregation had written to the editor asking them to print no more stories about her. That was the best way. Just let her wither on the vine. But Yuri saved the best for last. The Department of Defense is very interested in this woman. How interested? Very interested. Enough to have her watched. Now they were asking the ADL for help, and the ADL was coming to him. She can destroy you, Yuri tells him, destroy all you've been working for. The only thing they are asking him to do is provide a little manpower from his congregation to help them watch her. Nobody wants trouble. They just want to nip things in the bud. Simple surveillance that would be coordinated from their office in Columbia. Rabbi Geller's tape of Mozart opus in a minor has played out. His leg cramps are worsening. Still, he says, yes. Okay, so we're going to stop there. That's page 42. and we'll pick it up hopefully tomorrow or the next day. See you guys.